The title of this study was suggested by my wife, and I thought it was a good one. Whiter than snow, because we've all seen how white snow can be, right? Snow can also be dirty. It can be easily stained, yeah? If it gets a little bit of dirt, if you go in the countryside a little bit and drive, or if you drive on a country road and you see the snow on the sides of the road, how is it? White? It's not very white. It can be easily stained. Once it's stained, can it be white again? You cannot wash the snow. But whiter than snow, we're referring to the snow that is on the field, that is untouched by humans or by other creatures, and so it is very white and very bright. So when you go and you walk in the snow, sometimes it's very hard to keep your eyes open, right? Because it's so much light. It's light coming from up, and then all of this light is reflected from the snow, and so it creates such a bright environment. And this picture suggests that a little bit, and the title is Whiter Than Snow. Now, in order to fully appreciate the brightness and the whiteness of the snow, and of course this is in a spiritual meaning, this has a spiritual meaning for us, a spiritual application that we're going to do, and David in Psalm 51:7, he was applying this spiritually. We must understand if we really need to be whiter than snow. In order to understand that, we must understand our condition. Yeah, we must understand our position, our situation, our spiritual condition. And then when we understand us and where we are and how we look, then we would really appreciate when we are made whiter than snow. If we do not have a good understanding of our, maybe I would call spiritual blackness, then we cannot fully understand and fully appreciate the cleansing that is bringing us to being whiter than snow. So a little bit, we are going to discuss about God's church from time to beyond, and this is includes you and me. It includes the people that we study about in the Bible and all God's children from the beginning of time. Now, to get a little bit closer to understanding where we're coming from and what we are to be washed from and washed off, I would like to read Isaiah 64 verse 6. It says, "But we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are as filthy rags." Now, in the Old Testament, you've heard about the white robe, like the white linen. So, the white back then, they didn't have the bleaching processing that we have today to make the clothing or the materials, all of the robes that white. But yet they had the white linen, which was made from flax, and those clothes were worn by kings sometimes, and it was very appreciated. You've heard about fine linen, fine white linen. We find about that in Revelation also, and the righteous people who will be saved, they will be dressed in white linen. And of course, they didn't have the cleansing chemicals that we have today. So once a robe gets stained, once a white robe like that gets stained, it is very hard to bring it back to the pure white condition that it was initially. So it's very hard, very difficult without the chlorine and with bleaches and the detergents that we have today. Back then they didn't have all of this, so they were just washing them mostly just by water. So if it was just dirty by, clay, maybe you could bring it back to the original condition as white. But maybe if it was stained by something else, oil or grease or something, then it would be very hard to bring it back to the white condition. So in a spiritual application, it says that our righteousnesses, so our best deeds, our good deeds, are as filthy rags. Very hard to bring back to original white condition. And so I would like to go a little bit deeper into this condition. We want to understand more the need for cleansing that we have. In Proverbs 14 verse 12 it says, "There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death." So sometimes to us what it seems to be right is not always right, yeah? Sometimes we wonder which way to go, or the life brings us to different situations where we don't know, what career to choose, or where to move, where to live. We come to a crossroads like this, and we don't know which way to go. In a spiritual application, spiritually, many times we maybe get lost, or many people get lost, or don't know which way to go. And then there are many ways that open to them, many ways, and they all seem good maybe, or there is a way that comes to somebody and they say, "Oh, this seems to be like a good way." But just a superficial look into the way may not bring us the true end of that way. It says here, "But sometimes the end thereof are the ways of death." And so we need to understand our condition. We need to understand the color of our robes, spiritual color, yeah? And then to really appreciate the cleansing that the Lord wants to perform. So in Matthew 24:37 it says, "And as were the days of Noah, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man." Jesus tells this in one of his speeches to the people, one of his sermons. He makes an analogy with the time of the end and with the time of Noah. The time of Noah was some kind of a time of the end. Yeah, it was the end of the world as they knew it back then. And he says, as it was in the time of Noah, the same shall be in the time of the end. It's the same time of the coming of the Son of Man. And how was it in that time? We would like to understand how was the society, the people in those times. It says, "For as in those days which were before the flood, they were eating and drinking." Is there anything wrong with that? Yeah, we have to eat and we have to drink. Yeah, otherwise, drinking, water is very good, it's very healthy. If we do not drink enough water, different conditions may appear, different health difficulties and problems. Also, we must, eat the right thing. So that's why they were eating and drinking back then. Marrying and giving in marriage, nothing wrong with that. Until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And what the next verse tells us, and this is what I'd like to focus a little bit. Nothing wrong with all of that they were doing, unless they were abusing. Marrying and all of this can be abused, and eating and drinking can be abused. But the natural, the temperance use of these practices, nothing wrong with them. And it says, "And they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall be the coming of the Son of Man." Now this is very impressive to us, to me, that they knew not. Apostle Peter calls Noah a preacher of righteousness. That means he was preaching. He was preaching to those people that when he was building the ark, the fact that the building process was a witness to the people of the flood that was going to come. And yet it says here in Matthew, Jesus says that they knew not until the flood came. You think they didn't know that the flood was coming? Well, they heard about that, but they didn't believe it. They knew not. And this was the condition of the world in Noah's time. Now Noah knew, and his family, they believed the flood was coming. The others were continuing with their lives as nothing was coming, as there was need of no preparation, or as if they needed nothing to change in their lives. They were eating, drinking, marrying, and life was going on. And apparently they didn't know anything until the flood came. Then they knew it was too late. Yes. In Revelation 3:17, we find the same condition described in the time of the end, and even in the church during the time of the end. It says, "Because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods and have need of nothing, and knowest not." again, this knowing, we don't know. We don't know. It says, know is not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked and all of this. This is, I believe, shocking. And this is, I believe, is the biggest problem, the greatest problem that we have. Not necessarily that we are poor, that we're blind, we're naked. That's a problem in itself. But the biggest problem is that it says, you know not. You don't know. The people in the time of the end, they didn't know. In the time of Noah, they did not know. They didn't know anything. Yet they were hearing the preaching of Noah all the time, I imagine. He was going and preaching to the people. All the time. They were warned. God never punishes people without warning them before. All of those people were warned. They were hearing and they got so used to the preaching of Noah. They got familiar with it maybe. They knew all of that. They knew a flood was coming. They knew the theory. They were hearing it. But nothing was changed in their lives. They continued to be like they were before. I would like to share with you a vision that Sister White had in 1856. Very interesting vision. At the conference at Battle Creek in May 27, 1856, I was shown in vision some things that concern who? The church generally. It doesn't say the world, it says the church. The glory and majesty of God were made to pass before me. Said the angel, he is terrible in his majesty, yet he realized it not. Ye realize it not. Terrible in his anger, yet he offend him daily. It says, strive to enter at the straight gate, for wide is the gate. You know the parable of Christ with the gate, yeah? The wide road, the narrow road. And we have it maybe in a modern way. We have it in this picture, yeah? A wide highway, yeah? A narrow one where very few people go. It is very easy to go on the wide one. Very easy to be drawn and to be drawn by the majority and just follow the majority and all the world and the cares of this life and the difficulties, the challenges that we have in our jobs, in our neighborhood, in our daily life. While hearing the preaching of the righteousness, we may be in the condition when we don't know. Like those in the time of Noah, says you don't know. When David wrote this psalm, and he sang this psalm, the introductory verse, that was after he sinned with Bathsheba and he killed her husband. So he committed murder and adultery, both punishable by death in those times. Both of them. While he was going and bringing sacrifices, I imagine he was going to the temple as usual. He was doing all the religious rituals. He was doing everything that he was supposed to do, and he didn't know of his sin. Think he didn't know? In some way he didn't know. Or he thought, maybe it's hidden. Maybe the Lord doesn't. This is not that bad. Maybe nobody knows about it. Maybe the Lord will just disregard this sin. Apparently he didn't know, but the Lord warned him. The Lord warned him, and the prophet came and he gave him the message, and then he realized. Then he knew all of a sudden. He knew that what he did was wrong. Well, he knew that before. But everything, the life kept going on like nothing changed, and he acted like he didn't know. And now he found out. And then he was so distressed. He was so saddened by his own sin. And then he made this song, and he says, cleanse me with hyssop, wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. That's the context in which he wrote this verse. So, in order for him to write this verse, he had to understand and he had to know his condition. Otherwise, he would have never wanted to be whiter than snow. Why be whiter than snow? I'm okay. I'm going to church. I hear all the sermons. I do all the things that I'm supposed to do religiously. Yes, I have these filthy rags, nobody knows, I don't know. Opposite roads. We continue with the vision of Sister White. She says these roads are distinct. She is referring to the verses about the wide road, the narrow road. These roads are distinct, separate in opposite directions. Sometimes maybe we imagine them going parallel, one narrow, one wide. But no, they're going in opposite directions. One leads to eternal life, the other to eternal death. I saw the distinction between those roads, also the distinction between the companies traveling them. Now, we will focus a little bit on the people traveling on these roads. The roads are opposite. One is broad and smooth, the other narrow and rugged. So the parties that travel them are opposite in character, in life, in dress, in conversation. Opposite. So when you look at the one group, when you look at the other group, you see a distinction in their lifestyle, in their character, dressing, in everything, in conversation. There is a distinction. This is what she saw in vision. And know not. I would like to quote a little bit, and then I'll come back to the vision. It says, I saw many traveling on this broad road who had the words written upon them, dead to the world. The end of all things is at hand, be also ready. So, the people traveling on this broad road had this nice message. It's a nice message. We are dead to the world. We are outside of the world. The end of all things is at hand. We know that. Be also ready. This was their message. This was their profession. And yet in the vision it continues, she says, they were on the broad way. Now we imagine, first, I believe when we read this parable of Jesus with the roads, the narrow one, the wide one, we imagine maybe going on the wide road, the most sinful people, the criminals, the thieves, the murderers, all kind of sins, yeah? But we do not picture right away or easily somebody who's a churchgoer, who has a nice profession of faith, who has a nice message. We do not necessarily picture that kind of people. But yet in the visions, Sister White saw exactly this kind of people on the wide road. They were on the broad way, yet they professed to be a number of those who were traveling the narrow way. The profession was good. We are going on a narrow way. Those around them would say, there is no distinction between us. What are you saying? We are alike. We dress, we talk, we act alike. There is no difference, just the profession. Is it good to have a good profession? It is good. Baptism is a profession of faith. Yeah, in the baptism we profess of our faith to the world and to many witnesses and to God and to heaven. It's good to have a good message like this, to preach a nice message. Dead to the world. We have to be dead to the world. Well, be alive for Christ. And yet they knew not. Christ Object Lesson, page 118, it says there are some who seem to be always seeking for the heavenly pearl. Seem to be seeking, and sometimes we seem to be seeking. Yeah, we want to search, we want to be searching for the heavenly pearl, for the salvation, for the truth. There are some who seem to be always seeking. This is a good thing, to always be seeking for the heavenly pearl, to be in searching and to be looking for it constantly. But this statement continues, says, but they do not make an entire surrender of their wrong habits. So they seem to be searching, but in their lives nothing changes. Nothing changes. No change in character, no change in lifestyle. They do not die to self. He says here that Christ may live in them. Therefore they do not find the precious pearl. It says almost Christians, yet not fully Christians. They seem near the kingdom of heaven, but they cannot enter there. Almost, but not wholly saved means to be not almost, but wholly lost. These people seem to be searching. How do they seem to be searching? Maybe they participate like David did. all the spiritual rituals, all the services, he was there, he was present, he seemed to be searching all the time. Nothing changed in his life. Nothing was changed. Until he realized, until he received the warning, he realized, he repented, he understood his condition, he desired to be cleansed, and he asked the Lord to cleanse him. Now, when we find ourselves in this condition, and we are in this condition, whether we found ourselves or not like that, when we realize of this condition, then that is the first step towards being cleansed, washed whiter than snow. Without understanding the position and the condition and the situation of our hearts, we do not fully appreciate the washing that Christ wants to perform. And we do not appreciate the brightness of snow, and even whiter than snow. Almost saved. Almost not enough. And then in Christ Object Lesson, page 159, it says, "No man can of himself understand his errors." So the people in the time of Noah, they did not know. Well, Noah was preaching to them all the time. David, he did not understand his errors. Although he was reading the scriptures, he was hearing the preaching of the scriptures, and he had the Torah, he had the Word of God written. He did not understand of himself his own errors. The Laodicean condition is described the same way. They believe they are rich and they are dressed nicely and with white robes and all of that. They don't know. They know not. Of themselves, they cannot understand their errors. We cannot understand our own errors of ourselves. We can hear about it. We can read the scriptures and we can see that the commandment says, "Thou shalt not do this," and we do this, but we do not fully understand. Like David, he knew that was wrong, but yet those people in the time of Noah, they knew all of that. It says, "The lips may express a poverty of soul that the heart does not acknowledge." Jeremiah 17:9, it tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things, even our own. We deceive ourselves sometimes. And so the lips may express a poverty of the soul that the heart does not acknowledge. While speaking to God of poverty of spirit, the heart may be swelling with the conceit of its own superior humility and exalted righteousness. Have you ever happened to you? Sometimes we say something, or we read something, but our mind is going astray. It's somewhere else, far away. And then we don't know what we just read. We have to go back and read it again. The same can happen here. We may express a poverty of soul, and yes, we need the Lord, and yet the heart does not understand it, does not know it. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, it says, "I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and thy seed may live." The Lord wants us to set before us good and evil, to set before us, to tell us what happens if we do good, what happens if we do bad, and also He tells us when we do bad. Yeah? He wants to let us know. He wants us to know of the bad things that we do, because when we know them, then we'll be able to fully choose and make an informed decision and make an informed choice. So He wants us to be free, and He wants us to know. The promise that we have in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 13, it says it, "And ye shall seek me and find me." So David, he was in that terrible sin. He did at least 2 sins just there that was worthy of death, even by the standards of that society in the Old Testament back then. Adultery and murder. Both of them worthy of death. And he searched the Lord. When the Lord came to him and all of a sudden opened his eyes, "This is what you did. You are this evil man who took the sheep of your neighbor when you have so many." He really then understood the sin, the gravity of his sin. and he came to the Lord and he searched the Lord. And the promise here, he says, and he shall seek me and find me. When? When you shall search for me with all your heart. Just partly search for him, just with half of the heart is not enough. When we search him, when we truly desire him, then we shall find him. In Christ lesson 159, it says, in one way only can a true knowledge of self be obtained. So we want to know each other. We want to understand ourselves. I want to understand myself. This is crucial for me and for my salvation, and it is the same for all of us. If we do not fully understand us, if we do not fully understand the condition of sin in which we are, then we cannot appreciate the gift of God. And we cannot fully desire that salvation and that transformation, that washing. And this way in which we can acquire this knowledge of self is by beholding Christ. By looking to him. Instead of looking at us, when we look at us, we see what? We see people with a nice message that we put out to the world, a nice message, a nice profession, maybe many good things, going to church, participating like David in all the spiritual rituals and all the worshiping times and holidays and all of that. But when we behold Christ, we may be able to understand truly our condition. Then we may truly understand how our best deeds, our righteousness is before him as filthy rags. And then we truly understand that we really need a cleansing. But not just any kind of cleansing, the cleansing that the Word of God and Christ can perform. It says, it is ignorance of him that makes men so uplifted in their own righteousness. When we don't know him, then we have a better understanding, a better appreciation of ourselves. We appreciate ourselves more, and we have a higher understanding that it is in reality of our condition. When we contemplate his purity of excellence, we shall see our own weakness and poverty and defects as they really are. When we contemplate him, we shall see ourselves lost and hopeless, clad in garments of self-righteousness, like every other sinner. We shall see that if we are ever saved, it will be not through our own goodness, but through God's infinite grace. When we come closer to this realization, understanding our sinfulness, our self-righteousness, our condition, the condition of our hearts, then we will realize that we actually need that cleansing. We need to be made whiter than snow, like David was praying in his song. In Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, page 141, it says, the Christian life is a battle and a march, but the victory to be gained is not won by human power. In ourselves, we do not understand our sinful condition. And we cannot change in ourselves and through ourselves. It says, the field of conflict is the domain of the heart. The battle which we have to fight, the greatest battle that was ever fought by man, is the surrender of the self to the will of God. Giving ourselves to him wholly like that. Abandoning our worldliness or our own desires, our own little idols that separate us from God. Abandoning all of those, just focusing on Christ, allowing him into our hearts. That will make the change. The surrender of the self to the will of God, the yielding of the heart to the sovereignty of love. It says that no outward observance can take the place of simple faith and entire renunciation of self. But how many men can empty themselves of self? It says here, no man. No, nobody. We cannot empty ourselves of self. We can only consent for Christ to accomplish the work. This is the work that He wants to do in our lives. But in order for us to be brought to this position, when we allow Him, we consent for Him to perform this work, we must look at Him, behold at Him. We must behold Him and understand by comparison the filthiness of our characters. David had to fully understand that. Without that realization of his condition, he would have never composed this song. He would have never wrote those nice words. But then he understood those. He understood his condition. And then these words came from his heart. Cleanse me, and I will be, wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. In Revelation chapter 7, there is a group of people. This is the great multitude. One of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes? And whence come they? This is already in heaven. This is another vision. This is a vision of John in Revelation. And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. When David asked the Lord to wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow, that washing is being done in the blood of the Lamb, in the blood of Christ. It's interesting, he says, Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Hyssop was a plant they used to use it for cleansing. Hyssop was also the plant that was used to dip it into the blood of the lamb and then paint the doorposts in Egypt so that the angel of death should not enter into that house. Hyssop was known as a cleansing herb, and it was used also in other rituals in the Old Testament. And so, purge me with hyssop, I shall be clean, wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. This is what David understood. And this is what we must understand. We must come as close as possible to this realization. The heart is deceitful above all things, our own. It is very easy to deceive ourselves or to not know, just to not realize all the events in our lives go on normal, like nothing is wrong, like nothing is bad, like nothing bad is coming. Everything goes on normal and naturally. Jesus said in the time of Noah would be the same as in the time of Noah. The problem was they didn't know. So we must behold Jesus. We must look at Him and His great love that He had for us, and His great character, and His perfect character, and His holiness. And then we will realize our need to be washed. And then when we wash, we can appreciate now snow is very white. Yes, when it's clean, it's very white and it's bright. It's nice to see all the. You look out in the nature and you see everything white, the trees and the branches, the grass, the fields, the mountains. Everything is nice and white. David understood that through the blood of Christ, we can be made and washed whiter than snow. And this is the wish of prayer that I have for all of us, for myself, for my family, and for all of us present here, and for all God's people. That we find that washing, that we find the blood of Christ, the power that is in the gospel unto our salvation, and that we may experience this washing, this purification, this cleansing, and that we may serve the Lord with a new heart, new spirit,